Hello again, my warriors. Welcome back. Today, chapter 13, Out to the Desert. Just a quick note about this, something I have most certainly said before and will say again. You are never in a desert. Desert is not something that you can be inside of. When you are standing upon a desert, you are outside. You are very, very outside. You are exposed. I have done some small amounts of time in the desert. Done some small. I have been to deserts before, and they're incredible. They change you. Another quote I'm fond of: nobody walks out of a desert the same person who walked in. And so, to that end, chapter 13, Out to the Desert. After the night of the mass, the whole of the Varangian army returned together and stayed as a cohesive army at the barracks. They spent some small time in the city, the Christians, of course, attending their numerous observances, while the pagans drank. When they'd spent enough time resting and getting the craftsmen settled, they readied themselves to head out to hunt down more bandits. Apparently, the issue of tribes out to the desert was severe enough that the local governor was glad of Harold and his band's action. Harold and the others in his command structure were riding horses at the head of the army while the rest walked. They brought with them also a dozen creatures called camels to port the tents and other supplies. These things were immensely strange to any who hadn't seen them before, and still rather strange to all who had seen them. Local packmen joined along their campaign to attend the animals and provide guidance. Through the mountainous region, east of the city, they were set to travel through. From their exit, they walked along a winding road in a spread out pattern, some ranging ahead, others fanning out to the sides, all ready to fight and eager to hunt. It was immediately clear why and how the bandits had had so much success in these lands. The mountainous region outside of Jerusalem were filled with crags and passes that would hide them in preparation for when roaming travelers or traders came to make their way to or from the city. But the Varangian were not merely passing through. Other organized groups had been tasked with hunting these lands before. Some had made progress and won out, others had returned having found nothing. Harold and the Varangian army knew they were in the mountain passes, not for total victory. That would be impossible. They were sent out to put the fear of God or the gods into these men who called themselves bandits. They were merely a force of destruction, descending through the land like a wave with one ambition. Where the warring and battle was good and always welcome for the Varangian, the loot and plunder was the real goal. Bandits would always have with them the hoard of what they'd taken from the locals in their theft, and taking from them was sanctioned and considered a public good. There was no part the Varangian didn't love, even if all they won was water. Within the first week, they had encountered some few camps that they scoured out with ease, the enemy always retreating, but never far or fast enough. The camps they found had some few spoils, but never was it anything overly impressive that they could call a total success. In those first small fights, they also had lost 18 of their own, which they considered a heavy loss. But the fact that their tactics of locked shields and immensely powerful steel set them apart from the bandits who, thus far, had been more accustomed to merchants and pilgrims than a disciplined rank of fighters. Soon they passed from the high ranging mountains and came to a wide expanse of sandy dune. This was a land they had seen some little of in their time fighting in the north of the Africa, but never had they experience of trekking through them. The desert is a strange place, they found. Every dune looks like the other, which is at first a novel event that many were fond of. But too quickly, it turned to an ill-defined dread. The endless dunes made them feel, absurdly, that they were making no progress at all in their quest east, though they ranged many days and could no longer see the mountain behind. Beside the constant unchanging wilderness of the seas of streaming sand was the heat. The Varangian army was exceedingly well stocked with water and food. They had taken more than they themselves thought they would need, and were pleased they had done so. But the constant heat drew upon a man walking in the desert, made him fatigued instantly, and bore down on the souls. Eventually, finally, they crested another rise upon the road and came to the top of an embankment. From here, they were granted a commanding view of the valley made by the great sea. After so long in the bright and incredibly dry dunes of the desert, it was a blessing to see the waters of the sea. "What is this place called?" asked Bodil in awe of the view. "That's the Dead Sea," said Ragnar, standing by her. She sighed at the name. "Of course it is. Everything in these deserts is dead." "Oh, come on, lassie. Let's make for the waters. From what I hear, Lord Harold wants to make an ablution in the river of Jordan itself. Think, just think! We'll have a chance to bathe in the river Jordan." Is that special?" she asked. "Special?" he exclaimed. "It is! The River Jordan was mentioned in the Bible. It's a very holy and special place." He looked around, exasperated. "Olaf, Harold, brothers, please come help me here." "Aye, the river's a holy place," Olaf said, rubbing his head in the sun. He had taken to wearing a leather cap over the bare scalp to protect himself from the sun's rays. "There is much healing that can be made for you if you but will your baptism there." "Our gods are too far to see here, and don't make us do baptisms," Niels said. "Heimdallr can see this far," Inga said. "Eyes for all of Midgard." "This place feels like we're beyond Midgard. We crossed those mountains. We may have come into Jotunheimer now," Niels said, looking around. "If you see a Jotnar," Bodil said, "tell me, that I may slay it, that I may impress my lord." They all looked quietly at the lands before them. The whole of the army had paused and were looking at the vast lands before them in awe. "Well," Harold said with a grin, "now's your chance to make a fresh start at the river. It isn't too late to welcome the Lord Christ and save your soul." Fitbjorn shook his head. "But I'm guessing it will be too late once I'm dead, won't it?" "Go and bathe in the waters of the River Jordan. That is where we are going, isn't it?" "That's it there. If you perform the ablutions, it could be as good as a baptism." Olaf shrugged and wiped his hand over his head and replaced the leather cap. "There is little we can do as wholly as to enjoy our lives here in Midgard for the sake of the gods. They benefit the most by our action of living," Fitbjorn said. The others looked at him. "And they are never too far to see us. All this is Midgard. We have not crossed into Jotunheimer." He laughed. The whole of the army stayed standing here to look upon the grand vista they had come to, and to rest a moment after the endless monotony of walking through the dunes of desert. They drank water and sat in the soft sand. Fitbjorn, however, took his axe in both hands and strode forward ahead of everyone. "You there, warrior!" The commander, Harold, said after him as he walked. "Go you so boldly into uncharted lands? Alone?" "I am never alone, as I have my ancestors, my gods, my axe." He stood a moment, framed against the unknown lands before them. "Let me go ahead. I shall make these lands known, that you might follow." He didn't await a response. Didn't know if anyone had heard him. He just continued to walk. "Oh, not again. Oh, not that one," Harold said, seeing the man go ahead of the army. Many at the front of the army, Varangian, Christian, Heathen, local packmen watched the odd large man walking alone in a foreign land, his shield slung over his back, painted all black with a white bear upon it, his long black hair hanging from beneath his strong steel helmet. Let's go make certain he doesn't get himself taken by some god knows what, Ragnar said with a grin at the man's boldness. He, Hafeld, Olaf, and Bodil all walked after their friend to be assured he wouldn't stray too far ahead. Fitbjorn breathed deeply, smelling the strange dusty air of the desert. The river deep in the basin before him looked utterly inviting, and he felt like he could just run the whole way to it. He was reminded of the vision he'd had, the vast space to the end of the cavern where the root touched the ground. The distance to the far mountains didn't seem so long away as that. The concept of celebration in life had been much in his thoughts this last week. He had made an effort to be mindful in all he did, whether it eating or drinking or listening to his friends talk. During this time, he'd been much in quiet contemplation, which was not unusual, thus none interrupted him except for Niels, who still wanted to encourage his storytelling. Now in this place, the sensation being ahead of the army in a strange new land filled him with excitement and that lightness he had been seeking so long. Oi, laddie! Ragnar called, trotting up behind him. Something then took hold of his attention and he glanced up to see what it was. A sound also sprang from his left. It was the sound of something being dropped into stand. Attack! He yelled and ducked right just as another arrow landed where he'd been standing. Ragnar had in fact not seen the arrows come, but staggered a moment, now readying to fight. Fitbjorn stood in a crouch and looked around. There was nothing but the sand and the view. Behind him, the army started to organize and their shouts and movements grew cacophonous. But he did not look back. With total focus written on his face, he looked out over the lands before him, searching desperately for an enemy, but there was nothing. Fitbjorn drew his long sword and rolled his shoulders. Well, at least you have your armor on this time round, Ragnar said, coming to stand beside him. Why wouldn't he have that? Asked Olaf. I'll tell you the story with a strong drink tonight, Fitbjorn answered. He pulled his shield from his back and held it out in front of him, its size dwarfing Ragnar's own. Hafeld came to join them, his axe sticking over the edge of his shield. Where are they? He asked. Another arrow flew over their heads to the line forming behind them. They all ducked behind the wood and formed together to make the shield wall. Out there, apparently, Olaf said. Think we should rush them? That goes the way I think we should, Hafald said. Get close so their bows do them nothing, and we cut them down, all. Come on. No, that'll do no good, Fitbjorn said. I think it could be a lure anyway. They make us want to run out and chase them, but our backs are exposed to the ones waiting in the flanks. At this, they all looked around to the sand dunes beside them, rising like waves from the earth. What do we do then? Wait for the arrow to take... Hafald had to duck behind his shield as an arrow landed right where he stood. I see! That's what we're doing here, waiting. We have to go now! He pushed forward, free of the line, and made for where the arrows flew from. No, Hafald! Fitbjorn called after him. He looked back at the main army and saw they seemed content to just limp forward at a slow pace in formation. Oh, that's good tactic, he thought. Looking around, he saw that Harold, Inga, and Niels had come to join with them as well. Come back! Inga shouted after the men. He is in his battle flame, Harold's strong arm said. He cannot be called back until it is fed. Damn Stormhunter! He looked on him with a growing grin, the same delighted war mind filling his author. He started to walk after the man. Well, we can't leave him to fight down alone. Come on, Fitbjorn said and started after Hafald and Harold in a hurried pace. They quickly caught them and started to walk together in formation. Many hidden advantages here, White Bear, Niels said, looking around apprehensively at the bright, dusty crags. If these circlanters get a mind to swarm us, they'll do so easily. If they were going to, they would have already, Fitzbjorn responded, looking around in confusion. Where are they? The 7 of them formed into a circle and checked every direction around them. Something doesn't feel right, Bodil said. Disappearing enemy, Harold said. The rest of the army were still there, slowly approaching them, but even the arrows had stopped. It's an ambush, Fitzbjorn said. Aye, no shit, Ragnar responded. That's why they was shooting at us. No, that was the bait. He turned to the rest of the Varangian. They must be behind us. This is only the distraction. We are being used as the focus. We need to... He turned to Niels. Niels, you're swift. I need you to go and warn the army. This doesn't make any sense here. The man nodded, then looked around. He was clearly wary of running back the 30 paces to the army alone. You'll be fine. Run fast and have your shield around your back. White Bear, Olaf said. You aren't saying we're going to try and fight this side alone, are you? We have to. If these archers are left exposed to our back, we'll be slaughtered. They are already surrounding us. We, here now, are quick because we're so few. We stay together, and we hunt them down one by one. Who has skill with a bow? I, said everyone but Harold. Fitzbjorn looked at him. What? He responded, seeing the question. I'm sure I could figure it out if I... His eyes widened, and he wrapped his shield around Fitzbjorn's left side, catching an arrow. Fuck! No time, we need to move! Aye, now! He ordered, and they all moved to follow as he went left off the road. There was a mound of sandy earth there, and he knew he'd be making a target of them by merely standing here, but they'd set their course. They kept their shields ready to protect against the east, away from their kin, as this seemed the likeliest place to expect an attack from. When they stood at the highest place in the mound, though, they saw a bandit on the other side directly in front of them. The man was clearly terrified to see them all grow from the ground ahead of him, and it showed in his face. He frantically raised his bow and loosed his arrow, aiming at the large man at the front. 3 shields came and locked together to protect him, however, and the man turned to run. Got him! Bodil said, drawing and throwing a small axe. It stored straight through and true, but the man had moved enough that the axe took him in his right leg, and he shrieked in surprised pain. By the time the raiders were running down to the slope, and they quickly caught and killed him. Take the bow, Inga, Fitzbjorn ordered, and she took it without question. 6 arrows still, she said, impressed. Any in the shield still intact? I think this one here. Fitzbjorn grabbed the one in his and ripped it out, but the arrowhead tore from the shaft in the doing. Just use those. We need to move. There's no telling how many of them there may be. They turned right and ran in a tight formation. Inga at the back, an arrow nocked and searching for someone to shoot. They soon found another man shooting arrows in a high arc. It appeared that they had some idea where the arrows would land when shot at a particular angle. This ambush had been well planned. Inga dropped the man with an arrow, it piercing his chest, and the man screamed in the sudden pain. They closed on him and ceased his screaming. Fitzbjorn held up the bow, his quiver holding only 4 arrows. Who's next? Ragnar looked to Bodil. Go on, lassie. She looked at him, affronted. I know how to shoot. I'm not good at it by any measure, though. I'd much rather the knife than that. She held up her long knife she fought with. Oh, fine then, Ragnar said. I suppose I'll take it. He grabbed the bow and took the arrows, slinging the leather strap around his back, and sheathed his cross-guarded sword. These are really good bows. Good, Hafald said. Let's use them to kill the enemy archers. They ran off to continue their sweep. There were many large rocks among the sands, and each one they rounded with the greatest caution. shields tentatively peeking out before them, and only then would they follow. One such rounding proved their caution, as when half of Olaf's shield had pushed beyond the edge, 2 arrows slammed into the wood. "Damn be!" Olaf said, backing into Fitbjorn and trying to back further. "Looks like they're here. It's here they've gathered more." "Together," Fitbjorn said, and they all pushed out from the rock, locking their shields tight and pressing forwards. There were 4 archers there, all hurrying to let fly as many arrows at them as they could. The Varangian ran in a careful, measured advance and got closer and closer. The bandits started to back away as they continued to loose arrows. Harold then yelled in pain and slowed. There wasn't time to stop, so the rest continued to push. One of the enemy decided to run while those others drew weapons, shouting something in their foreign tongue. Luckily, there were no spears among them, only swords. So the Northerners pressed with their same deliberate momentum. Hafeld cut down the first of the bandits with a chop from his axe, and another one caught one of Ragnar's arrows in his neck and spun away. The last was stabbed through by Bodil when she charged him. "Is Harold dead?" Olaf asked, looking back in exasperation. "Fuck that! I'm not in the ground yet!" Olaf breathed a sigh of relief. He had an arrow sticking through his left leg, just above the ankle. "Oh, thank God! Thought you'd been hit bad. This is bad. Oh, God, it hurts." Harold said, holding above the wound and grunting through the pain. "We have to go," Hafald said. Fitbjorn looked back and forth between them. But we aren't leaving him." "Damn right you aren't leaving me." "Quiet. We don't know where they are, and we are alone." The others all looked around, suddenly aware of the ledges and the hidden places. They heard the beginning of the actual battle beyond, the sounds seeming to bounce off of every wall all around them. "Get him supported. Olaf, let's you and me carry him." He carefully sheathed the sword across his front and put his shield over his back again. "We need to get you back, but we can't stop our hunt of these archers." Harold looked at him, disbelieving. "You're telling me—" He looked down. "I'm gonna be fucking crippled." He shook his head. "How quiet can you be?" "Oh, shut up, White Cloak. Just carry and we'll get to the enemy. I won't holler at all." Slowly, and with great trepidation, they advanced their position. Hafald and Bodil at the front, their shields held ready to stay enemy arrows. Inga and Ragnar directly behind them with readied arrows to let fly at any they saw. They rounded another hill of stone and sand and saw a man ducking behind a rock and loosing arrows. Inga drew and aimed carefully, then released, and the arrow flew straight into the man's head. His neck twisted to the side cruelly, and he was thrown violently to the ground. "I hit him in the head," she said. "You hit him in the head?" Hafald said, turning back. "That is a tough shot." "First time I've ever done that," she admitted. They carefully came to the man's body and retrieved what arrows they could. "Cut the bowstring. Here, I'll do it," Bodil said. She stepped on the arms and slashed the string with her knife. "We don't want any of their number to pick it up after that and follow us, do we?" she asked their expressions. "She's right," Fitbjorn concurred. "If one gets behind us, it'll be a horrid loss. Keep moving." "Fuck, this hurts," Harold groaned. Then he prayed something too low to hear. "Keep moving," he repeated, and they did so. The rocks around them were tall, and they made certain every moment to round with caution, as the last thing they wanted to do was overexpose themselves to a large enough force. The other thing they were mindful of was the potential for enemy alarm. If one of them cried out and warned others, they might descend upon the Varangian position. At 7, with 1 wounded, it was not a good odd, unless they kept hidden and killed mercilessly. All of them then heard a yelling behind them, and Olaf turned from supporting Harold to see a bandit shouting at them. It was clear he was calling to someone. "Ragnar! Inga, shoot them!" Olaf yelled, and an arrow soared overhead, but the man ducked to his right and just avoided the shaft. Then, to his side, came another man, and another. They all drew blades and started to advance. There will be more ahead, too, Fitbjorn called. Remember their tactic. They flank and attack from two sides. Be ready, Brynulf. I'm always ready, the man said, and scanned the area in front of him. How far are we from the army? Asked Harold with a grunt of pain in his voice. Doesn't matter, Bodil replied to him. We are where we are, and we will fight here. They have their own fight right now. You're goddamn right, Ragnar said, shooting another arrow. This one caught one of the bandits high in his shoulder, but didn't serve to incapacitate the warrior. The man even knocked an arrow to his own bow, and the three of them all shot together at the same time. Olaf, Harold, and Fitbjorn locked their shields together and stopped all the arrows. Shouldn't have done that, Fitbjorn said, excited. He threw down his shield and sprinted for them. They were only 12 paces away, and he managed to close that distance in a few bounds, Hafald and Olaf following behind. His great axe was in his hands, and he brought it down viciously on the first man, cleaving him from shoulder to heart. He stepped on the man's belly and pulled the axe, then lurched to the right and slammed his shoulder into the next man, who fell straight back. The axe, now free, he stabbed forward, and the wooden top of the haft crashed into the man's throat. He strained a loud choking sound, and his hands went to the spot as he dropped to the floor. The bandit he'd bowled over lay on the floor wheezing. Clearly the wind had been driven from his chest when he landed. Fitbjorn roared and leapt onto him, stomping his head again and again until he was sure he wouldn't stand. Finally, he turned to the man who still held himself at the neck. But he was on all fours and in a perfect position. The black-haired raider raised his axe overhead and swung down to behead the man. But as his shield was about to land, an arrow hit his chest at an angle and sent him staggering. I need my shield, he thought in an instant. The man on the ground looked over at him with damnable defiance in his eyes, and Fitbjorn had to retreat as Hafald and Olaf arrived at his side and stood to protect. He was aware of a burning at his chest and was curious how much damage the arrow had done. Pick up your shield and get behind me, Olaf yelled at the man. You know how lucky you are! Fitbjorn huffed enormous breaths as he hoisted and turned to see where his shield was. Inga had it in her hand and was bringing it for him. He grabbed it from her and turned out front to protect himself. I may be the luckiest man alive, he said under his breath. As he placed the shield, he felt an arrow rattle against his arm and noticed it still dangling from his front. The barb had got caught in the chainmail and hung there now. Definitely lucky. The man who'd shot him was lifting the wounded bandit and trying to retreat with him. An arrow flew from Inga's bow then and went through the downed man's ribs. She cursed quietly. She'd been trying to hit the other one. That man released his friend with a yell and ducked back behind a rock. Pick him up! We need to run from this place! Inga! Come to the back and watch our retreat! She jumped to follow the orders, and they carried on around the outcropping of stone. By their estimation of the geography of this area, they should be where the road had been leading to. They were aware that they needed to return to the army to safeguard Harold, but leaving off the task of slaying the archers was something they could not do either. The road came into view a moment later, and Hafald at the front saw another set of dunes and stone on the other side that would provide the exact labyrinth they had just traversed. I saw one there, he said, holding up the advance. There was a bandit walking forward. I think he didn't see me. We could probably go in and get behind them. It's probably just the same as before, Fitbjorn said. They are out in a circle. We have to go and end to the end of the circle. He looked down at Harold. I know it hurts. But if we don't kill these archers, we're going to have a camp to tend that at all tonight. We aren't going to have a camp to tend at all tonight. The man groaned and sighed long. I understand, he said, pained. Let's just get it done. I want a bow, though. I hate feeling useless like this. Don't worry about that, Fitbjorn said with a grin. If you weren't shot, we'd probably be going so fast Halfald would stumble us into an ambush. You mean, Halfald said, another ambush? They all steeled themselves to the next fight to come and crossed to the other side of the road. By Halfald's direction, they moved around a boulder slowly and fell upon one of the enemy without making a sound. The man fell to his axe without ever realizing he was dead. They carried on that way after, seeking out the next target and killing them by arrow or blade. They killed quietly when they could. They feinted off attack when they had to, but they killed every bandit archer they found. By the end of their grisly reaping, they'd cut a swath wide around the Varangian army. But it did end, and the Varangian found themselves the victors of yet another battle out to the desert. That night, they made their camp in the place the battle had taken on. They cleared away the enemy dead, salvaging what they could. They gathered together their dead and tended the wounded. It had been a heavy toll on the Varangian army, with 12 dead and 29 wounded. They had lost much. The enemy were all wiped out, of course. It had apparently been their plan to distract them on one side and have enough death and chaos spread that those who fled did so into the knives of the archers. There were no fires that night, not enough wood. But the mood of the Varangian army was still well in high spirits. This was a battle they had won. Therefore, the Christian God had willed their victory, and the pagans were bound for Valhalla. This is what they believed. Brothers! The commander Harold called out, with arms stretched wide. My warrior brothers and sisters, Bodil said, standing. Her arms went out wide too, and she basked in the attention from all. Right, that is, Bodil. Sisters too, he smiled at her. My fighting Varangian. To this there was a collective and hearty, aye. He held before him a cup of metal, something foaming out from the top. This victory does not belong to me. It does not belong to you, he gestured around. This victory today is the result of these fine warriors. Harold, come forth. Ragnar, Olaf, Bodil, and Halfald. They all rose and went to stand before him. Harold supported on Olaf's shoulder. Fitbjorn and Inga sat together. They knew they were going to be excluded from the ceremony, but still knew not why. Neither were overly dismayed. Your name is Harold, isn't it? It is, Lord. And you were shot in the leg there by an enemy arrow. And still, you went out to hunt and to protect this army. Well, yes, but I was being carried to much of the... But you went! You didn't run back. You didn't demand to be tended. You fought on with an arrow in your leg. And I understand that you are a Christian. I am, Lord. Tomorrow, at the Jordan, I will perform a special rite with you. And with your brother Olaf and brother Ragnar. You rest are still pagan. I will let you to tend your own souls. But know that you have my commendation and praise. Your action saved us in this fight. It is to you I drink tonight. He lifted high his cup and drank from it. The whole army stood and cheered their brave deeds. Then those chosen out for praise nodded and received filled cups and accolades. They returned to sit with their friends after still, and they spent the night sitting together. Why were you not recognized? Harold asked. I tried to explain it was you who really performed the heroics out there. It does not bother me. There are... Fitbjorn paused, looking for the word to describe it. It is at times inscrutable the way things are done with this, Neil said. I'm sure there will be other instances where these two are given what praise they well deserve. He raised his cup, and they all joined in, honoring to White Bear and Inga. They sat beside each other and raised their own cups back, smiling and laughing some at the situation. For tonight, we honor you both, our leader and the finest archer I saw in any battle, Harold said, raising his cup. Don't worry about us, Inga said, her eyes sparkling. I think we have all the support and the love that we need. I would not trade this circle for all the hollow words Harold Sigurdsson could allow for in a day. They all raised their cup to that. End of chapter 13. Well, thank anyone here for joining me. Always a pleasure to read out these. So I hope you are all brave and charge boldly into the dunes of unknown. It's called you.